Trump. Okay. As he rightly introduced, I was a former student here. Okay. So, well, my name is Emmanuel Mensah, and I'm a senior data science consultant at Adastra, which is a data management consulting firm in Germany. Not only in Germany, we are also global in other countries. And so I consult in various sectors, in automotive, also in the financial, in the logistic sectors also. In the last few months, when this generative AI and also ChatGPT, came into existence, we had huge media hype on it. It's not only a hype, but companies were thinking how they can develop products with this generative AI. So in my company, I was leading research on it, developing some products specifically using Microsoft platforms and the OpenAI models also. So I would say for the last 6 months, I've got some good experience, and I thought that it was necessary to come and share some of the things that I think I know about generative AI and also ChatGPT. I had my PhD education in economics at the University of Mensah, Italy. Before then, that was when I moved from here. I went into Italy as a Erasmus Mundus student studying mathematical engineering with two universities, University of L'Aquila and University of Hamburg. But before then, like my HOD said, I was a student here studying mathematics with economics. As a hobby, I like to go hiking and take pictures normally during the summertime. Right, so that is just brief about me. And brief for today, I will be sharing with you some high-level information on generative AI, ChatGPT, and also the impact that it has on economy and also work, how it's going to change the anatomy of work generally. I think most of you have heard of generative AI, and I think also almost everybody here has used ChatGPT before, right? But then we'll go a bit deeper into it and understand what really the generative AI is. So that brings us to the agenda, a bit overview of generative AI. Then we'll look at OpenAI and also ChatGPT, the applications of it, especially if you want to do data analysis, if you want to use it to carry some research, how you can use the tool, to do all this task. And then we'll look into prompt engineering. What is it? How do you communicate with the language model like ChatGPT, and how do you get the best out of it, especially if you want to get the best response from the language model. So we'll look into some of the best practices when it comes to prompt engineering, and then the last two will focus on the impact of.
Thank you once again for hosting. As we start this meeting, we pray that you lead us. So
how it's going to impact our work. There's a fear in the media space where people think that AI is going to take our work, actually, but this is not really the case. We expect AI to augment whatever that we are doing to support the work or task that we are having in our various workplaces, but not to take it. But of course, some work may be displaced, and we'll look at some of them also. So basically, when we talk about generative AI, what is it? So all of you here have phone, and there are many times where you pick your phone, you try to test something, and you will see that there are some suggested words that counts for you to choose, right? Now, most of these suggested words are words that you have been using on your phone. So if you have a particular word that most of the time you kind of use, you will see that anytime that you try to write a sentence, it suggests for you, thinking that this is going to be the next word that you are going to use. because it's using historical data, right? And it's doing predictive analysis here. So it kind of predicts, for you that last time when you tested, you said Kofi was going to, it was school that you wrote. So probably this time when it's going to be Kofi is going to school also. So we call this predictive analysis, where the whole prediction is just based on some historical data that you have on the phone and identify some patterns and make prediction based on it. The question then is, what if it's not using historical data, but it's generating a new content altogether, right? So it's the AI is able to predict something which is quite new, not what, it's already as information or a certain data that it already has. And this is where generative AI, comes in, where it takes the form of either text, if you want to test, or probably speech. If you want to generate any content in terms of the ideas that you have, you can talk to the AI and it's going to generate this idea for you. Now, one typical example I think you also have on the phone is Siri, where you can pick your phone and just ask anything from Siri and it's just going to give to you. Whatever you have as a content there is quite a new content. So generative AI functionality is all about creating content. So it combines some algorithms and deep learning, deep neural network techniques to generate content based on the content that it has already been trained with. Now, actually agree with that. So it's not quite new. In 2010, Google introduced this autocomplete feature that offers suggestions whenever you want to complete, a sentence, and that is one visual or visible or generative AI that I think most of you here can remember. In 2013 and 2014, we had the Deep Bossman machine that introduced some models that paved way to develop other generative AI models. For instance, Ian Godfellow and his colleagues, they introduced this generative adversarial neural network, which help a lot in terms of developing other generative AI models. I think perhaps the most visible one is the Alexa, which Amazon released in 2015, where we have speech to text, and you can also have even direct speech to speech that you can say, Alexa, bring me Azonto, by maybe Shatawali, and you're going to have this one play for you. Yeah. Then in 2018, also we have OpenAI, coming in with their own generative AI studies. So they developed this GPT model, generative pre-trained model. So the GPT model 1 was in 2018, but it wasn't functioning as it's supposed to be, because we expect the content generated to be more like a human-like, because the generative AI is all about performing natural language processing task. In 2019, they released the GPT-2, which was capable of creating human-like text through natural language processing. I think perhaps the one which got the media hype and it received a lot of attention in the media waves is in 2021 when they released the ChatGPT GPT 3.5, which is what the ChatGPT is built on. And here it has the capability to generate meaningful text. You can communicate with the chatbot and ask any question at all. So the whole thing about the generative AI, you will say that we are in the era of content revolution, where any ideas that you have, the AI can help you to create it. And this could be in the form of text, it could be in the form of speech, it could be in the form of video, or even pictures, per se. Sometimes we see some people generating artificial pictures, like somebody can just take your picture and just create some image, like you, and which before wasn't quite possible. But now with generative AI, we can have all of this. Now, you will say, when we talk about generative AI, where will you, place it in the general AI, landscape? Is it really a type of AI? So basically, it's not a type of AI. but it's a form of AI, right? And in the general landscape, we have artificial intelligence, where it's as a discipline, it helps systems to emulate the way humans behave and perform tasks. So we have robots, we have other systems which are mimicking the way human intelligence is and perform certain tasks that we manually do in attempt to automate the whole process. Now, artificial intelligence comprises machine learning. You can have reinforcement learning, optimization, all form part of artificial intelligence. But as a subset, we have machine learning, which allows system to learn automatically, from some algorithms and improve, based on experience, right? So that is machine learning. Then machine learning again has a lot of algorithms. Also, one of them is the deep learning. So deep learning is a subset of machine learning that actually teaches the computer how to process data, like the way human brain works. So it's inspired by the neurons, right? And this is where it's getting its name from, artificial neural network. Now, this is where we have generative AI. It's a subset of deep learning that focuses on generating new content, for instance. So it uses this neural network. We have a new architecture. We call it the transformer architecture, which basically helps the generative AI to generate new content in the form of video, in the form of text, in the form of what you have, right? And the example is the Google Assistant that I said, or Alexa, that's I also mentioned about. Now, how do this generative AI predict text or generate new content? So within the generative AI is a model, we call them large language models. So they are trained on massive data sets to achieve advanced language processing capabilities. So the traditional methods that we have, you can just load a model on a small data set and it will perform a task for you. But for generative AI, it needs quite a lot of data set here. And with that, it can generate the content that it's looking for. The basic premise of the language model is the ability to predict the next word. Or you can say it's a subword, based on the context that it has observed so far. So here you see you want to give a word like the dog sat on. The dog sat on. Then there is a database of words, and the language model is predicting for you what the next word is going to be. But this is based on probability also. So the dog sat on, what would be the next probable word? So we have, it looks into the database of the words that is there, the training, and it sees that normally the dog sat on the floor. So, and the next one is going to be floor, and it has a prediction of 85%, as compared to the dog sat on the bed or on the chair, which normally it may happen, but the probability is quite low. You may have a simpler example, like, can you please come? So here is quite difficult for the language model to give you exact probability because you have different words, options, which are all quite probable. Can you come here? Can you come home? Can you come back? Are all words that fit into when you say, can you please come, right? But then per each training, it can give you the word like here as a 45% probable word, or maybe can you come home as the next word that normally, you may. And that's the reason why anytime you are dealing with any generative AI model, or ChatGPT, for instance, you should understand that the response that is given to you is a guess, it's probability. So not exactly something that you should take wholeheartedly as 100% fact. Now, the general process or the working process of the language model is, as I mentioned before, there's this transformer architecture models. In 2017, Google researchers brought a paper which is called Attention is All You Need. And this is where they introduced this transformer architecture. Now, in this paper, they showed how for large language models, we need what we call attention mechanism that will focus on the input sequence when you have given a word and you want a response, it will focus on this particular area that the words are and generate the response for you. But normally, you have, let's say, a prompt, which is as a string, and it serves as the seed or the basic information that the model needs to process whatever. Then you have the transformer architecture taking over. So there's the pre-processing stage, there's an encoder and decoder before it generates the word for you. Now in the pre-processing stage, it transforms the input into numerical representation. So what the computer understands is not just the sentence you are given, but it understands things in 1, 0. So it transforms this one into numerical representation, and then accomplish this by mapping it into a vector space. So in the vector space, you have words which have similar meaning or words which are close to each other. And then you have this kind of association between them, such that whenever a prompt is given, it can easily get the connection between the words or the information which is in the vector space and give you that particular information. Then there's an encoder which generates a hidden representation of the input text and captures also the input text and their meaning. In the decoder is where the attention mechanism is employed. So the attention mechanism basically focuses on the input prompts, which are most relevant. So it's massive amount of data. And the question is, when you just give a prompt, you think of how is the model able to understand what I've just given and give me the response right away. And this is what attention mechanism does. So you just focus on the input that you have given and just quickly go to where that particular information is and generate the response or the test for you back within some few seconds. Then you have the response created next to the word in the sequence, utilizing the context and the input prompts previously generated. The next one is the output, which is generated to the user. So this is sort of what is behind the scene, how those large language models are working. And you can see this is more complex, but this is just an overview of it. For instance, how ChatGPT is processing prompts that you give and generates the response to you. Now we have a lot of language models. The one that a lot of you have heard is the ChatGPT by OpenAI, but we have other big organizations who are also developing different language models. For instance, Google is developing. It's still in the experimental phase. They call it the Google Bard, and it's using the language model, Pathway Language Model 2, which is currently what we're using. Before, they were having this Lambda model, which is also built on transformer architecture, and now they are using the PAM. And Facebook is having this Llama 2, which is also another transformer architecture language model. These models differ by the parameters, which is sort of the weight of the neural network that they are trained with. Now, the higher the parameters, the more capacity or capability of the language model to give very good response in a more human form-like. So you see currently the ChatGPT 4 that we have is having 100 trillion parameters. That means that it can process a lot of tasks and give you a lot of, it's also fast and give you some responses that you want as you expect. And we have Google Bard, which is just with 540 billion parameters. Lambda is having something around 137 billion parameters. Similarly for that is Lambda. Similarly for Lambda, we have 67 billion parameters. Now, in terms of image generation, Google Bard says they can generate image. Similarly, the two language models belong to them. So for Lambda and Google Bard, PAM, you can generate image, with it. The current ChatGPT that we have cannot generate image. They promise that the next ChatGPT and a model, I think probably the 4.5 will have that capacity to generate images. Chatsonic, it's actually not a fundamental language model. It's built on GPT, and it has this capability of generating image. Actually, it's using GPT and also Google Internet Service. So if you want any new information, you can just use something, for instance, and you can just get that new information. The training of the models here, as you see from the data set and the training, is up to a certain time. ChatGPT training is restricted up to 2021. So beyond 2021, you can't get any further information. You have ChatSonic, which is using the GPT model, but it's also powered by Google. So you can then access the internet for new information that you have and you need. Llama, Lambda, Google Bard are still in the experimental phase. So we expect that maybe in the coming days, they will have something which is more current. But currently, Llama is up to 2022 in terms of its training. Now, let's focus a bit more on ChatGPT, because it's quite the most popular model, also the model with the highest capacity in terms of generating natural language processing task. Like I've said before, this language model is developed by OpenAI, and it uses the transformer-based deep neural network architecture and trained using enormous volumes of test data in the form of books, articles, web pages, wherever they can get data they have used to train this particular model. Now, in 2020, November, it was launched, and within just 5 days, because of the capability and the wonders that it was doing, it has about 1 million users, and that was quite impressive when you compare to other technology tools like Instagram and Facebook, Netflix, which took some quite longer time. Currently, there are about 100 million user base, and according to OpenAI, almost every day we have 30 million people using ChatGPT, and there's about 10 million queries which is made every day. So that means that if you're here and you are not using ChatGPT to do your research or any analysis, then you are quite missing out, because yeah, it's also the case that there's a cost associated. Yeah, and this is just a statistic from OpenAI in terms of how much it costs to train the ChatGPT in the model, and this is around 12 million. And it means that also for daily costs, you have about 10,000 for operating the ChatGPT. But this is not information I think that is quite relevant for you. Now, with the ChatGPT and OpenAI, I try to be much informative as possible, not really going into the technical part, but as I can somehow guess or suspect, not many people here are actually utilizing the tool. So my interest will be on the potential applications, capabilities, and the wonders that you can do, so that you have that kind of interest to use the tool. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So what are the key components of the model? So as already said, the model is built on, the ChatGPT is built on this generative pre-trained transformer, and it's also trained on large volumes of test data that is able to perform a lot of natural language processing, tasks like test categorization, test creation when it comes to questions answering. You can have the language model ChatGPT doing all of this for you. It also a large-scale model that means that it's able to comprehend a wide range of topics, right? Then it can produce some logical, authentic information as you do the interaction with the language model. It's context aware, which is something that is very important. So when you are interacting with the language model within the topic that you are given, it's quite aware of what you are saying, and your next prompt, it understands that same context and respond to it, right? So you can just get that feedback as you probably will want. We have the API, where if you want to develop, you can have access to it, and also develop. For instance, if you want to fine-tune the model on your small data sets, organizations may want to develop, let's say, a chatbot that is performing a specific task, or it just have information only on a specific topic, right? You want to train the ChatGPT on maybe legal topics, right? And here you can fine tune the model on this small data set. So it provides this kind of possibilities for you to develop. If you were a developer or you are somebody who is interested in developing something similar like the ChatGPT. Now, as I mentioned before, we had the GPT-1 first, which in 2018 was using around 116 million parameters. The capacity was high, but the model wasn't performing not so good as we have today. And then came the GPT-2 and also the GPT-3 and the 3.5 table, which the ChatGPT is built on, is having similar parameters, and that is able to carry out variety of language activities with that task specific fine tuning. But now we have also the new GPT-4. I'm not sure if anyone here is using the GPT-4. That is available to Plus users. So it's quite not free. You have to subscribe to it and pay $20. I think that's what I pay every month. But like the transition from the GPT-1 to 3, this is also very highly capable model that is able to perform tasks more than the normal ChatGPT that we have. And you will see briefly some of the tasks that it can perform when I show you. Now, one thing which is quite interesting and is that now they are trying to make GPT be able to browse the internet. So already OpenAI has this kind of they have aligned with Microsoft. So they have this, I think, connection, should I put it that way. So Microsoft has been, and now ChatGPT in the beta phase is trying to use this bank, to provide information, readily as in live information. If you search, you give prompt. For instance, if you just want to know the news that's happening in Ghana today, you can just go there and get you all the information. I mean, the important news that you can have and give you this. There's also the advanced data analysis options where you can do so many wonders. Yeah. For instance, if you're a researcher, you can just do, you can even upload a PDF there and just ask the model to just tell you what is in the PDF, summarize it for you, or do whatever that you want to do, It also comes with the plugins and the Directory, which is another product of OpenAI for image generation. So these are just in the beta version, but if you have GPT-4, you may have access to these models. Like as I said, it also has support 26 languages, which is quite more than the one the GPT 3.5. So if you want to access not just in English, but in different languages, then you can have the language model performing this task for you also. Now, if you don't have $20 to access the GPT-4, these are some of the ways that you can access it. So there's a ChatSonic that I mentioned. We have the, I think the subscription version where after a certain limit you have to pay, right? But you can have the free version, and it's powered by Google also and GPT. So you can use the GPT-4 through the ChatSonic, or also Being AI provides this possibility to have ChatGPT-4. Then if you want to have the API for the Plus users, if already you were a developer working with OpenAI and you have the API before, they will just send you an email of the GPT-4, but otherwise you can just be on the waiting list and they can send you, and this is purposely for developing, right? And not just GPT-4, there's a rumor that they're going to introduce also GPT-5. And looking at the training time, we expect that in the next 2 years, GPT-5 will come in session. So this is going to be available somewhere 2025, maybe by the end of the year. And there's consensus in terms of what the language model is doing, because now government and other influencers in the technology space want to see or understand how AI is evolving and how it's not going to be destructive in some sense. And the more we have the race of developing this high-level language models, it could be that if we don't take care, it could be destructive, to us in some sense. So people like Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak has raised some concerns, for this organization to cause the development of GPT or any language model beyond GPT-4. I mean, to OpenAI beyond GPT-4, for them to really access and have a bit of responsible AI and control over it before we can, continue developing new language models, so that we don't have the negative or the harm aspect of AI visiting us, right? Now, some of the applications of GPT, first one is the chatbot, which if you're a developer, you can also develop your own chatbots, with, but then you can create some conversational chatbot with it. There's a text generation where you can produce text, including some articles, some tales. You can just ask the language model to tell you some jokes, and it will just give you some beautiful jokes here. Test completion, it can also do this test completion for you if you want to do test summarization, which is quite important. So, for instance, if you have a long paragraph, you can just ask it to summarize it for you in few sentences, or probably say that just summarize for me as a class 5 pupil, so that the language will be not as advanced as an advanced person. Then you can also do language translation with it. There's a sentiment analysis, there's information retrieval, content creation. There's also code generation. So these are some of the use cases or the applications that the language model is capable of doing. And I will show you some of them that I've done. Now, specifically on code, so you can use the ChatGPT or any of the language models to do code generation. You can do bug detections. If you are working on some code, you can optimize your code with it. But then, for instance, if you want to maybe write some boilerplate, to scrap a website using Beautiful Soup, for instance, it can just generate a skeleton, code for you, and you can then, work on it. So you don't have to start, writing code from scratch. You can have the language model developing something, for you, then you work on it. You can also research and compare. If you are doing data analysis and you don't even know the specific library to use, for instance, you can just say, okay, well, I want to plot something. Do you think pandas or maybe Protly is something it's the best library for me to use? You can just do some nice research analysis on it and give to you which library that you have to use. And sometimes, maybe if you're working with a colleague and a code is written and you don't have the clear understanding of it, the language model can also help you to understand the code. You just have to put in the code. There's a caveat here. You don't have to put some enterprise code or code which is which shouldn't be in the public domain. Yeah. So because every information that you put into ChatGPT is taken into their database for training in the next GPT that they are going to release. So you have to be much careful in terms of what you do, because there was a situation where one company, the developers just put the code into the ChatGPT and it became public and they got sacked. So this is something that you have to be much aware. You can also add comments to code if actually you want to let people understand the code for it to be more readable. You can do this one. And I think lastly, for that, you can just say, add comment to the following code. You insert the code and it will just be adding some comment and explaining the code line by line. Or if you want to write the code in a certain style, for instance, if you want to check whether the code adhere to best practices and conventions, like the PEP 8 standard, you can just write the code. You can just test with it. For instance, you can just, if you have a code, you can say, okay, well, can you write the following code in accordance with the PEP 8 standard? You put the code there, and this is the normal standard that if you're working as a developer, we expect the code to be, and this, you can use the language model to do that. Now, in terms of code generation, the simplest task is if you are doing data analysis, or if you are just working on any task that requires some code, you can just visit the language model and just, give a prompt that write this code for me, and you have a lot of languages that you support. So whether Python, R, or MATLAB, or any of the codes that you are using for your research, it can generate the code for you. For instance, this example, we have Postgre and SQL tables here, and I have this columns like employees department, and I'm asking it to write the query to list the name of department which employed more than 10 employees in the last 3 months. So it doesn't have a data set, but it's able to generate SQL code for me, which if I'm working on this in the enterprise environment, I can just use this code and probably edit it a bit and put in there and do my query. And similarly, an example is like maybe in Python, can you write a Python function that will reverse a string? So you have a string here, 1, 2, 3, ABC, and it tells you certainly yes, it can do that, and it's write this string for you, where it's able to reverse the string as the output, and you can use this output if it works for you. Sometimes the result that it gives is not so authentic. Like I said, it can hallucinate. Yeah, it can just give you some confident, should I say, confident response, telling you that, oh, well, this is so correct, but sometimes it's not really correct. That's why you have to, probe a lot. But for those in the coding area, you definitely will run this code in an environment to see whether it's working or not. So for instance, if you run a code and it's not working, you can even take whatever information that you had as a bug and put it back there and say, well, I get this error and the code is not working. It will tell you that, well, I'm sorry, can you try this one? It gives you another option, to see if that one will work for you. So this can help you, can aid a lot, in your work, so that you don't have to just be alone. Sometimes you have to call on somebody, to help you implement certain tasks, but this can be your friend to, do a lot of things or code tasks that you want to do. And some of the use cases or the applications, one of them is the test generation and test classification. So the first one here is me just giving a prompt that can you write a 75-word summary of what ChatGPT is, and it's able to just write this one for me in 75 words. Or similarly, I give a task where I ask it to classify it. So let's say you have some news item here, and you want to let the language model classify for you whether it's entertainment news, whether it is sports, or whether it is tech news. So first you give an example. We call it few short learning. So you give an example to it like this. So headline 1 is like this. Then you give the indicator, this is going to be an entertainment. So it will learn from it in this way. And when you give another headline, major retailer announces plans to close over 100 stores. So what will be the category? Can you categorize it? Then it tells you, okay, well, per understanding of it, this is going to be in the business category. So this is one way to use the model, and we call it this classification, use case. You can also use it for test summarization, for researchers. This is very, very important, right? So here I have a prompt, which is about antibiotics as a type of medication used to treat bacterial infections and blah, 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 blah. Of course, I don't want to read everything. So just summarize this whole thing for me in 1 sentence, right? And it just gives me the core information that captures the paragraph that I gave. So it says antibiotics is a medication that treats bacterial infections by killing blah, blah, blah. And that is a summary of it, just in 1 sentence. Now with the capability of searching the internet also, it means that you can just give a link to the language model and ask it to just maybe summarize it for you. So I was testing it. I just picked a Wikipedia link, and it was about Afrobeat. If I had said summarize this Afrobeat link, because it knows about Afrobeat, without even accessing the link, it's going to tell me some stuff about Afrobeat. But I wanted to know whether indeed it can access the link. So I don't say anything. I just say summarize this link, and it detects that the link is about Afrobeat. In 5 sentences, it just writes me what is in the Wikipedia page. So instead of me going to the Wikipedia page and read a whole lot of things about Afrobeat, it's able to just summarize it for me. It tells me that Afrobeat is coming from, it emerged in the 2000s from Ghana and Nigeria. One thing that I was surprised, because I've also not taken my time to read what is in Afrobeat. So sometimes this thing can hallucinate. I saw something like Banku music, right? So I was surprised. I'm like, are you hallucinating? Is it there? So I went to Wikipedia to see whether indeed there's a Banku music there. Then I thought, okay, well, this is a good information, because Banku music is actually there. There is this Nigerian Afrobeat singer who came to stay in Ghana. He called his music Banku music, and I think he liked Banku. So that is why you put this kind of information there. So it does a good job. And this is the GPT-4. So it doesn't hallucinate as compared to the GPT-3. And most of the information that it gives is quite authentic, I must say. So this is one use case when it comes to text summarization. Again, I wanted to test one. So I just went for one paper that I wrote with my professor. I just picked the PDF and put it there. And I asked it to summarize it in 5 sentences. So it's able to read the PDF of the article, and it tells me, so I wanted to verify whether this information is correct. And indeed, this is my own paper, so I know. So whatever is written here is exactly the core part of the paper. And this is one way as a researcher, if you have access to the form, you can actually use. So maybe take time to read everything before. Normally we read the abstract and go read the conclusion. But here you want the language model to do the task for you. Can you just summarize what this article is talking about? Or you can even say, can you summarize to me, like maybe a high school student, so that if the paper is too technical, you can just break it down for you in that manner. So this is, another use case or another application of it. But then there is what we call a chat PDF. So just to introduce this one to you, if you really want to go through your own PDF on your desktop, you can use this tool. You can summarize up to 3 PDF, up to 120 pages per day. But if you want to use more than that, then you have to go for the upgraded version, which is $5 per month. So this chat PDF is also quite interesting. So if you have, let's say, your own PDF, you just ask some information in the PDF, and it's able to tell you the pages that information is located, and it works more like the ChatGPT also. If you are a teacher, you may be interested in certain exams, and that is another application of it. So here was testing maybe exams or quiz or question generation. So I just put this kind of information, and to give an example, I said short training, and ask the language model to write 3 questions for me from this particular information that is given. Right, and it's able to generate it on the right-hand side here. So it sets about 3 questions, yeah, which is quite good, yeah. So you don't have to sit down. Sometimes certain questions, writing them is quite difficult, yeah. So this is one way, of course, as a teacher, probably you can use as application of the language in the model. Now there's also the entity extraction. So sometimes, yeah.
If I'm allowed to find something already, can we go to the question?
Yeah.
If the questions are set, they become part because of the ChatGPT or the PDF or however. Now, the lecturer, academic is going to be aware, so that he or she doesn't degrade himself, because they're going to find them. That is where it's coming from.
Yes.
You can modify it.
Yeah, you are right. So and that, yeah, I think that is one thing about ChatGPT. Of course, if you are going to use the content of it, especially for research, assuming you want to let ChatGPT write an introduction for you, it's similar like that. You can just pick the same thing and send it to the journal. It is going to be rejected. So for whatever content that you have, this is aiding you. It's not replacing the tasks that you're supposed to do. It's supposed to aid you. You may take 2 hours maybe to set these 3 questions in terms of you thinking, but this one just generates something for you, and you have to work on it like my teacher here is saying it. So you have to work with it bits to make it more human-like, not as a bot has created that one also. Yeah, so I mean, there's also that kind of suggestion. So QuickBooks, yeah, QuickBooks, that is kind of paraphrase. So there's a workaround. If you don't want the exact content given to you to be used, then you have some workaround, like the QuickBooks, for instance. It does that kind of summary. So I think that is one way to do workaround so that you don't use the exact content. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that one up. So another application is entity extraction. So with the entity extraction, you want to extract some entity like locations, name, maybe from a text. So I'm a text here. My name is Emmanuel. I'm calling from Downward Insurance Cape Coast. My colleague mentioned that you are interested in learning about our comprehensive benefits. Could you give me a call on this number when you have the chance so that we can go through the benefits? And you have maybe a colleague also in the same department whose interest is just on those entities in this particular sentence. And you can use the language model to extract entities like the person's name, the company, the location, and also the phone number. So there's one use case of a project that I worked on in my company is CV parser. So it's generally a broad project for HR recruiting. And the language model, specifically the Da Vinci model, was used in this case to develop a CV parser tool. So for instance, you see maybe a random candidate CV here, and we feed this to the language model and we ask it to extract the relevant information in this CV. So it's able to get me the name, the summary, and all the relevant information that the CV will have. So most of this recruitment firm, they have this ATS systems that normally compare that of the candidate CV to the job which is advertised. And this is what they go through. So the information is extracted from your CV, and then they do some similarity analysis with the job which is advertised and see whether you are a good fit or not. So if there isn't so much similarity in terms of what is on your CV and what is advertised, then you just receive some rejection that we can't even start an interview with you. So and the part where the OpenAI comes in is the extraction of the CV, which you can use also as a case study. In terms of data analysis, you can use also the language model for it. Now it's more easier than even before. Like I said, you can I went for the Titanic data set. So the famous, it's a Kaggle program for those of you who are in the data analytics area. So Kaggle is a public domain where there's a lot of data sets and they have this competition for people to work on some problems. So the Titanic is one of the famous Kaggle program, which is based on the tragic sinking of the Titanic ship, right? It records data about 891 passengers. The goal of this problem is to analyze and predict if passengers have survived or not, based on the information that is available on the passengers and also about the outcome after the sinking of the ship. So if you are in the data analytics area, of course, either you are experienced or you are someone who is a beginner and you want to learn, you can go to Kaggle and see what others have done. But if you want to go through this, with the current GPT-4, you can just download the data, put the data in there, and just say, tell me something about the data set. And it's able to just give you this kind of information about the data set. So the columns in the data set and what they mean, and the data type, everything they just given to you. The interesting thing is that it also generates the code, for you, because you will see here, before it gives you the answer, it has the working, yeah? So it's working and it's working, all of them before the answer is generated, it just look for a particular code that would help it generate the response. And you can look at the response here. So this is not to replace what you're supposed to learn or you learning the data science. Of course, you have to know the pipeline, you have to know the theory behind. But if you really want to study or if you want to do some analysis, that's an easier way. this one can help you. Of course, you can also do some comparison. You must know, otherwise the response or the result given could not be verified whether it's correct or not. Now, I ask on the same dynamic data set analysis, ask it that there are some missing data in it. Of course, I know, but you can just probe that do we have missing data? It's going to analyze it and tell you. I knew it, so I said that, okay, the training data contains some missing data. Can you fix it? Then it first look at it and see the columns which are having the missing data here. And it provides me this kind of information that age is having 86, mixing values, carbon is having 327 mixing values. And that gives me some options. There are different ways of treating mixing values when you are doing data analysis. So for age, for instance, we have the mean, median imputation or predictive imputation, drop rows, of course. Then you would then have to decide which of them that you want to use to treat the missing data. So this is a way of effectively doing some data analysis. Of course, if you want the language model to aid you, right? And similarly, you can do some exploratory data analysis for you. You generate some nice graph. For instance, I say, okay, explore the data set with graphs, right? Then it tells me what graph is right for which column, right? So for this column, which is survive, it tells me that it's going to use a box plot. And for maybe the column, which is P class, similar box plot, age is going to use a histogram. It's able to generate these ones for you. Again, behind the scene, you can have the code that it has used. And if you are working as a data analysis person, you will be ordinarily write this code, and you can adapt this code, for instance, and just refine it and work on it. So what is helping you is not for you to make lazy, not to write code, but rather to aid you to not spend so much time in developing code not from scratch, for instance. So it's not only about data analysis, also as a use case, if you are maybe a researcher in the infectious disease model, for instance, it can help you do a certain task, where I have this infectious disease model, which I've written here in this word. I just gave it to it and asked it to solve for the SIR model. So this is the model. It just gives it to me in this form. And it tells me to solve this ODE, I need to give some initial conditions and also the values for the parameters before it can generate the solution for me. Of course, I'm not in this field, and I couldn't get the initial conditions and the parameters. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just finding the equilibrium points and the basic reduction number, which I have read a bit to know that in works like this, this is something that is looked for, the equilibrium point and the basic reduction number. And again, I don't want you to provide any unnecessary explanations because that's not what I'm looking for. And it's able to do that. So it picks it and it's able to, provide me the basic reproduction number here, which if I have the parameters and fix them inside, including the initial condition, is going to give me the exact number. And it's able also to solve for me the equilibrium points. The one for the equilibrium, it generates for you. So ordinarily, you would do some analytical, working and solve them. And sometimes an easier way is to use maybe the language, the model, ChatGPT to assist you to get this. And further on that, it will also show you the code that was used to generate the equilibrium point. So everything that it does, it solves it. This is a computer with numerically, and it gives you that numerical code which it's used. And I wanted to also know the semantic representation, and I just asked it to provide me, and it just gave me this, which it doesn't look too interesting, but it's sort of a form of the semantic representation if you are working in the infectious disease modeling research area. Yeah, and again, you can have explanation to some of the terms. Of course, if you're writing paper, I'm sure these things are also written. Okay, so general in terms of research, Yeah, this is where you can make use of the ChatGPT. You can use it for text generation. You can create abstracts for your research papers or maybe introduction, or you can do some summaries, or even right from the very beginning, if you want to create some ideas, you want to write a paper or something, and you just want to generate ideas, it can just give you some random thoughts, and you could then synthesize what is given and work on it. You can also do some data analysis with it, as I've shown. Literature review, you can search and summarize relevant articles on the subject. It can make it easier for researchers to also review the literature. It's more like your writing assistant, which it can support you with tasks like proofreading, the grammar checking, and also sentence rewriting. The sentence rewriting is quite important, and I think that is one thing which researchers do. So you read a paper and you pick some text from maybe that paper, you want to paraphrase it and maybe cite that particular person. Sometimes it's quite difficult how you are paraphrasing it because you want to keep also the information there. So one easier way is just to maybe put that paragraph there. Can you paraphrase for me? But again, you can't just use that like we just mentioned. You have to maybe do some work around. Either you add some human touch to it, or probably send it to some another tool. These days, even the keyboards, we have this journals who are using plagiarism tools to test them. So yeah, they can see. So you have to be careful. So in all, you have to add some human touch to it. You don't have to be lazy and say, well, it's giving me the result and that is it. Yeah. So it's just trying to aid you. And there's also the model development. I think there's much content I have, and because of time, I will write through some of them. There's some limitations also with the use of the ChatGPT. The first one is the hallucination, which you have to be careful with it because the responses that it gives are guess, as I said. So some of them are inaccurate. So you really have to verify the response which is given to see whether it's correct before you pick it. The current one has updated information, is up to 2021. If you want to use the before with pen, then you can have current information, but you have to use the current ChatGPT with care because it can give you some confident trickster response as if it is current, but ideally it knows that its training data set is up to 2021. So you have to have this in mind, and of course it has also know the image. Yeah. Now, how do you communicate with the language model? And this is what we call the prompt engineering. Yeah. So the language model has to understand, the instructions on the prompt that you give in order to give you the best response. So you have the language model here. You have the prompt, has some components like the task description, giving some specific, let's say, background. Sometimes you can have the input indicator and also maybe the current input, and you can just give the output indicator, for it, to give you the response in that format. And you have the completion and the response that will be given by the language in the model. Right. There are different categories in terms of the prompts. That's anytime you are chatting with ChatGPT, you give your prompts could be information seeking, right? So this is where you want to ask something using what, how, which, when, and all those types. Just to seek information, you want to know the height of the Eiffel Tower, and so you just ask what is the height of the Eiffel Tower to give you. It could be instruction based, like the way we deal with Alexa. So you are just giving specific instruction. Do this task. Not for me, like also the way we deal with Google Assistant. You could be comparing, things together. So you have to structure it in a form of comparison. If you want to do some reflective question, like in the last 5 years, you wanted to know how your savings account would have been, and you ask that question, of course, is going to just reflect into the past and probably give you a certain response. It could be a joke. One thing that I really like and I appreciate and I use a lot is the role-based one. So the role-based one is where you ask the language model to position itself in a certain role and act in that manner and give you the response, right? So assume that you are a senior data scientist, right? So write this Python code for me. And so it's going to write as a senior data scientist. If you wanted to write as maybe a junior data scientist, it will write it in that format. Right? So the role-based one is quite important, especially it's one thing that, normally if you're interacting with the language model, you can use. Yeah. There's also the context-driven and chain of thought. So you may have some complex task where you need to aid the language model before it can give you the response. Yeah. So now that we have the advanced data analysis, sometimes you may not need a chain of thought, but if you are developing, if you are the developing end, it is a case that to have maybe a completion task, you have to use this, chain of thought, break the task down, and to reason with it that if I say 1 + 1, the answer should be 2. Before I go to the next, if I say 2 + 2, the answer should be 4. So this is what we call the chain of thought. That's reasoning in a systematic manner before the language model will understand you and also do the same thing similarly, for you. Then the process is this. So normally what is important is a loop, right? It's an iteration, process. You don't just go, to the language model and just give something and you just give a prompt and the response comes like the way you want. Sometimes you don't get the exact response right from the very beginning, so you have to, fight with it bits, yeah, because it doesn't understand you. It's a language model, so you have to provide clear concerns, instructions with unambiguous, directive. Incorporating what is very important is a few short learning. Sometimes you have to add some example, to it. Yeah, if you go and add the language model to tell you something about cookie, for instance, it's quite ambiguous. Yeah? So cookie would be what we have on, computer, website, those cookies, right? If you go to a supermarket also, you can buy cookies, but not what we have on the computer website. So how will it understand that you are talking about this kind of cookie, right? So you may be on the left and to be given the response on the right. And this is where you have to provide something ambiguous, or at least I'm talking about cookies like biscuit or something. Then it knows that you are talking about this and to give you the response in this way. And whenever the response is given, you have to evaluate the model response. You have to always assess the accuracy, the relevance of it. Is it complete? Does it make sense? Before. Then you also have to identify some discrepancies. Sometimes the response might not be what you want, so you have to identify it, understand the reasons behind the deviations, and restructure your prompt, right? So adjust the prompt or the instruction, refine it, and do iteration process until at the time that you get the response that you want, then you will stop. So that is normally the way we do the general prompt engineering, and I don't think you will have enhanced, response from the model. It's going to improve the effectiveness, also the performance of whatever that's you want. Now, so few best practices. I think I've already mentioned some of them. Always be clear as much as possible. Give context. Sometimes you need to give some background information for the language to understand what you're talking about. And some examples, provide clear directions rather than restrictions. So teach the model what to do rather than telling it what not to do, sometimes. So give specific instruction, like use 3 to 5 sentences, a sentence, paragraph to describe this product or describe this for me, rather than just restricting it, in terms of what you shouldn't do. And sometimes you have to break down your queries. If you have a complex task, don't just put everything down there. So break it down a bit and let it understand you and just do this iteration process to get a response. Use multiple choice questions. Sometimes it's important, and always do iteration method until you get the final, response. Now, I think I'll just use a few minutes left, to highlight about the impact of generative AI, which is also quite, important. Yeah. So recently, McKinsey and Company released a paper in June this year, and it was about the economic potential impact of generative AI. So the result I have here mostly is from that particular paper. Now, they say that generative AI will have impact on productivity, and it could add trillions of dollars into the global economy, because this is going to enhance the work, impact the work that you do more positively than what people think is going to be negative. Yeah. So just a snapshot of the impact to global economy. So about 2.6 trillion to 4.4 trillion, value, can be generated from generative AI across different industries, right? And we'll have the generative AI, helping to raise global GDP by 7% over the next, 10 years, right? And this is if organizations or countries adopt the generative AI. Specifically in the area of sales, AI can increase productivity by 3 to 5%. And we can also have it's delivering productivity from 10 to 15% of overall research and development costs. generative AI also have potential to automate approximately 50% of global activities. So the autonomy of work it's quite going to change. Yeah, if you've been teaching, you have to improvise the way you teach, right? Because now there's generative AI and the students that are also using, right? So your teaching is not just going to be traditionally, the traditional methods that you use. And also for those in the industry is the same thing. Yeah? So we'll have our work being changed a bit because of the use of generative AI. Now, in terms of comparison, that was done with some developed and advanced, developed and emerging economies. Selected countries like Japan, Germany, France, United States, as developed economies were used compared to that of emerging economies like China, Mexico, India, and South Africa. And the result was that with generative AI, as you see, with that generative AI you see as the red, with generative AI is the blue, you will have that increase in productivity. So for instance, for the global one, you will have that increase from 0.2 to 3.3% within this time range. Now, this also comes with the adoption of generative AI. So for economists that adopt generative AI in the early stage, they're going to have a lot of productivity increase than those who will do it in the late stage. But overall, the deployment of generative AI can accelerate productive growth, leading to value addition in the economy. And this automation will also boost productivity growth from 1%, 0.1 to 0.6%, even from 2023 to 2040. Now, in terms of knowledge work areas, so generative AI will have the biggest impact on collaboration application of expertise, activities that previously had lower potential for automation. So for most physical jobs, the impact is going to be less as compared to those in the highly skilled area. So physical jobs performing unpredictable physical work or performing predictable physical work, you don't see the impact of generative AI to be much. So you have the red color to be without generative AI and the other one with generative AI. And the difference is really not that much. But you see in the highly skilled area where we have decision making and collaboration, where people are applying some expertise, managing and developing people like managers, interacting with stakeholders, you have a huge impact of generative AI as compared to when there's no generative AI. So work activities that involve communication, interaction will have greater potential to be automated through AI. And this will accelerate the transformation of work in occupations such as education and technology, because these are also in a high-skilled area, right? And this is, I think, for teachers, one thing that has to be mindful of in terms of the impact that is coming their way. Now, with respect to different business functions, it is the case that for those in the sales marketing are going to have the highest impact, right? So customer operations, sales marketing, software engineering, research and development will account for 75% of the total value that will be generated for generative AI use cases. This is as compared to supply chain, manufacturing, and finance, which have a lot of tasks which require not highly skilled labor, and the value addition will not be so much as compared to these skilled areas. So you have software engineering and customer operations, for instance, having also the highest potential value due to the adoption of the AI tools and technologies. Now, across occupations, so just as a fact, the education sector is going to receive the highest impact or the boost with the adoption of generative AI. So the deployment of actually the generative AI technologies will have the maximum impact for workers in the skilled area, specifically those in education, because the content, education is more about content, right? So transfer of knowledge, and this is where generative AI is revolutionizing. So this is where we have the higher impact, and that is why if you are in the academic area, you have to really embrace it and make the best out of it. So work areas like agriculture, mechanical, installation, transportation service will not have that much impact as compared to those in the highly skilled area, business and legal professionals, and STEM professionals will have the much impact as compared to. And in terms of customer support functions, yeah, so we all have for different times dealing with customers, organizations, and you will have also impacts. We will have increase in issue resolution about 14% an hour as compared to the situation we have in Hilton. So when it comes to customer service interactions, customer agent interactions, faster resolution, this is what generative AI will bring, right? You have generative AI tools that can be used to retrieve customer data for faster resolution and solve the customer problem than before, where we have to just go and look into the database and look for the customer information before we can provide services to the customer. So reduction in issue handling, we'll have it by 10%. And in terms of manager requests, asking for issues to be resolved, this will also be decreased. And we'll have increase in productivity in this area by 30 to 45% of current function cost. Now, in some cases, also we'll have workers who will have to stay in same occupations, but their mix of activities will shift. It is also the case that some workers will have to shift occupations. So this is the little scary part where, because of the adoption of the AI, some workers might be relieved a bit, especially those in the content creation area. So jobs like data entry clerk, proofreader, you wouldn't need a proofreader now. Of course, the language model can do that. Translator, copywriter, social media manager. My understanding is that you're not going to have an outright replacement of these people. So, for instance, if you're having 5 social media managers, now they can use, aid their work with the language model. So instead of using 5, you may need 1 or 2. And that means that the other guys have to go, and this is how it's going to be. So those in this area, communication, attention to, even for mathematical skills. So if you are somebody who have been providing maybe extra classes, it could be the case that now I can go to ChatGPT to solve my questions for me. I tell you, and I always say for those for those who should not actually fear whether they're going to lose their job, it should be the people who actually should learn the language model, right? So if you learn the language model, then your probability or possibility of being laid off is minimal because you know it. But if you are in the same organization and your colleagues knows it and you have not really embraced it, then it is the case that they can kick you out for the colleague to use ChatGPT to do your work. And that's a fact. So these are some of them. And the last slide, I will just talk about also the risk of adopting generative AI. So there is a bit of the fairness concern because this is for the development part. Generative AI may result in algorithm bias. So the training data, if it is quite biased, then it could just generate response or output which are also biased now. So there was a bit of media conversation regarding even gender on the response that ChatGPT gives. And this is where, especially also with race, where biasness comes in. So for responsible AI, we need the fairness, and the language models which are being developed, it's expected that they include this kind of fairness and not include any biased data. Yeah, there's also the privacy concern. Yeah, so the tools use data and information, especially for individuals. There's a huge privacy concern in terms of the data that you give to the language model. If you give your CV to ChatGPT to probably see whether you fit for a particular job, it's just like you have just given your CV to 20 people in this room to just check it. Yeah. So if you really don't want your information or your data to be in a public domain, then you don't have to put it into ChatGPT, especially if you work in an organization where privacy of data is concerned, where I'm coming from. You don't joke with it. You don't just put your information in there. So privacy is a concern. There is intellectual property risk here. So the language model is trained with every information that they have. So people with their patent and all others is being trained with, and this is intellectual property, for some people. So there's a concern on, this one infringing on the intellectual property of people, right? So this is also being talked about how this can be, dealt with. Then the last one is the hallucination part. So you have to be careful in terms of relying on the language, model. So you don't have to be over reliant. Let's say your SI model, it works, and now you're super happy. So instead of probably doing the actual thing that you used to, you're always letting the language model do your task. And at the point when, let's say, you don't even have your PC around you, or you don't have the chatbot, then you cannot really do the task. So this is quite a problem. So reliability is important. So also you have to be careful with the result that you give. As we said, this is a probability guess. So you don't have to take everything into as the results. And you don't have to take certain medical suggestions, legal suggestions, or whatever from the language model. Let it aid just in your work. There's also concern about environmental impact. So with regards to the environment, according to study by earth.org, it's revealed that the training of the GPT model uses a lot of water, for instance. So there's about 700,000 liters of water, which is equivalent to the amount needed to cool a nuclear reactor. And this is what is used. Again, even for the modest conversation, like 20 to 50 conversations, it's using 50 ml water. Yeah. So if you look at the billions of people who are using this language model, then a lot of water is being used here. And when it comes to carbon emissions, there's about 8.4 tons of carbon dioxide, which is produced because of the power it's used to power the data centers and training the model and also maintaining it. So these are some concerns that leaders in the AI space, especially those who are developing language models, are also looking into, so that we will not have the negative impact visiting us, but rather making more use of the positive impact. So I think that is the end of my lecture or small talk, and thank you for listening. And if anybody has a question, you can discuss.